Number 10. The Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is an ancient artifact that has long fascinated scientists and historians alike. It is believed to be the world's first mechanical computer, and it was discovered in a shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, where it has been buried under 45 meters of water. Today, the mechanism is housed at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, where it continues to captivate visitors with its intricate design and advanced level of technology. Upon examining the mechanism, experts were amazed by the level of craftsmanship and sophistication it displayed. The device is made up of a box with dials on the outside and a complex assembly of gears mounted inside. It is estimated to be about as complex as an 18th century top-notch clock, despite being over 2,100 years old. In fact, the level of expertise and attention to detail seen in the mechanism's construction was not seen again in Europe until the development of mechanical astronomical clocks in the 14th century. But the real mystery of the Antikythera mechanism lies in how it came to be. Based on what we know of ancient Greek technology at the time, it shouldn't even exist at all. There are no known writings or records of similar devices from the period of its creation, leading some to wonder if it may be from an advanced as yet undiscovered civilization. Whatever the cause may be, the Antikythera mechanism remains a truly captivating and unexplained artifact that continues to puzzle experts to this day. Number 9. The London Hammer. The London Hammer is a small hammer that has been the subject of much debate and speculation among those who believe in ancient civilizations and advanced technology. And this is all because it's supposedly 400 million years old. Yeah, you heard that right. The hammer was found in London, Texas in 1936 by a couple who were out walking, and they noticed it sticking out of a rock. The rock in which the hammer was found is dated to be around 400 million years old, which has led some to believe that the hammer is evidence of an ancient civilization with advanced technology. And yes, it's only a hammer, so I don't know how advanced this could actually be. There are several theories about the London hammer and its possible origins. Some believe that it is a tool made by an ancient civilization, while others believe it is a modern tool that was somehow placed inside of the rock. There are also those who believe that the hammer is all just a big hoax, created in order to mislead people into believing in these ancient civilizations and advanced technology. Despite the many theories about this hammer, there is no conclusive evidence about its true origins. Other scientists have found that the hammer does contain unusual features that could have been created using modern technology, which leaves the questions of its origins up for debate. Number 8. The Disc of Sabu. The ancient Egyptian civilization is filled with wonders and mysteries that have puzzled historians and archaeologists for centuries. One such enigma is the so-called Disc of Sabu, which is a circular stone object that was discovered in 1936 by a British Egyptologist, Mr. Walter Brian Emery, in the tomb of Prince Sabu. Prince Sabu was the first dynasty governor and son of Pharaoh Enedjib. Measuring 610 millimeters in diameter and 104 millimeters in height, the artifact is made of metasiltstone and has 3 thin curving lobes around its periphery, as well as 3 biconvex holes separating the lobes from the rim. In the center of the disc is a thin tube that is roughly 10 centimeters in diameter. And despite numerous studies and theories, the true purpose of the disc remains a complete mystery. Some experts believe that it may have been used as a musical instrument, while others think it is a battery used for electrotherapy. The fact that the artifact was found in a royal tomb suggests it may have held some sort of special significance, but the exact nature of the significance remains unknown. Whatever its true purpose, the Disc of Sabu is a testament to the ingenuity and creativity of the ancient Egyptians, who were able to create objects that continue to intrigue us for thousands of years. Number 7. The Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is an ancient artifact that has puzzled archaeologists for years, dating back to the Parthian period, which is from 250 BC to 224 AD. This mysterious object consists of a clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod inside. It has long been speculated that the Baghdad Battery was used for some kind of electrical device, perhaps even a primitive form of a battery. The theory that the Baghdad Battery was used as a source of electricity was first proposed in 1938 by William Koenig, the director of the National Museum of Iraq. Since then, various researchers have attempted to recreate the device in order to understand its true purpose. Some have suggested it may have been used for electrotherapy, while others believe that it may have been used as a galvanic cell to electroplate objects. Despite numerous attempts to recreate and understand the mystery of the Baghdad Battery, its true purpose still is unknown. The lack of any written history or documentation from the time period has made it difficult to determine exactly how the device was used. Number 6. The Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript manuscript is a mysterious document dating back to the 15th century that has confounded researchers for decades. Considered to be the world's most mysterious book, it is written in an unknown script by an unknown writer. As well, the book is written in an unknown language and filled with intricate drawings of plants, stars, and other seemingly unrelated illustrations. So the meaning and purpose of the manuscript has remained a mystery for a long time. Some suggest that the manuscript was written by medieval monks, while others believe it could be the work of an alchemist or a scientist. It was first discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfred M. Voynich, who believed it to be a coded message written by the famous scientist Roger Bacon. Since its discovery, numerous attempts have been made to decode the document, but none have been successful. Many believe that the text is written in a constructed language or code, and some have even suggested that it could be the example of extraterrestrial communication. Despite numerous theories and attempts at decoding, the Voynich manuscript remains one of the world's most enduring mysteries. Its enigmatic illustrations and strange language continues to fascinate researchers and the general public alike, and has inspired numerous works of fiction and speculation ever since its discovery. In the hump of our list, we have the Tamil Bell. The Tamil Bell is a fascinating and mysterious ancient artifact that has intrigued experts for centuries. It was first discovered in the 19th century in the ruins of a temple in Tamil Nadu, India, and is made of a metal alloy that has not been identified. The bell is decorated with intricate carvings and inscription in an unknown language, and is thought to be around 2,000 years old. In 1870, the inscriptions were identified as ancient Tamil, which is a language that hadn't been used for hundreds of years. The inscriptions were translated to the bell of the ship of Mahadin Baksh, indicating that the owner was a Muslim Tamil of great stature from a famous Indian shipping company. In 1940, the age of the Tamil Bell was estimated to be 400 to 500 years old, dating back to the period between 1400 to 1500 AD. This has led some people to believe that there was outside contact with New Zealand hundreds of years ago before English Captain Thomas Cook arrived in 1769. However, there is little evidence to support this theory, and the true mystery of the Tamil Bell still remains a mystery. Others believe it to be a religious artifact made by an ancient civilization, while others believe it to be a tool or device used for some unknown purpose. Number 4, the Bagon Pipes. The Bagon Pipes are a series of iron pipes that has been found in the Qinghai province of China near Mount Bagon. These pipes range in size from toothpicks to the size of a football field, and they're estimated to be around 150,000 years old. This is a pretty big deal because the area wasn't even inhabited by humans until around 30,000 years ago, according to many Chinese historians. So who built these pipes and for what purpose? That's the question that has been puzzling researchers for years. Some believe that they may have been built by an ancient civilization or even from extraterrestrial beings. The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences has not dismissed the possibility, with researcher Yang Ji stating that the pyramid located near the pipes may have been created by intelligent creatures. Other theories include the possibility that the pipes are the result of iron-rich magma forcing its way up through the Earth's fissures, or that they are simply fossilized tree roots that have accumulated over time. The odd thing is that the pipes have also been found to contain 8% of unidentified material, as well as the residue of radioactive material. The true mystery and origin of the Bagon Pipes remains a mystery, but it certainly is an intriguing and unexplained phenomena that continues to capture the attention and imagination of many. Number 3, the Piri Reis Map. The Piri Reis Map is a historical document that has garnered much attention and controversy over the years, more specifically for showing that Antarctica was ice-free. Created in the early 16th century by Ottoman Turkish admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, the map is known for its detailed and accurate depiction of the coast and features of the New World. This included South America, the Caribbean, and parts of the east coast of North America. In addition to these features, the map also includes notes of the geography, climate, and indigenous people of the regions depicted. However, it is the depiction of the northern coast of Antarctica on the Piri Reis map that has sparked the most controversy. According to the map, the northern coast of Antarctica is shown as being ice-free, which some believe suggests that the continent was mapped before it was covered in ice. This idea has been met with skepticism, as there is no historical or scientific evidence to support it. In fact, geological evidence suggests that the latest date that the Queen Maud landed in Antarctica could have been charted as an ice-free state is around 4000 BC. Whatever is the truth about the Piri Reis map, one thing is for certain: it continues to question everything we thought was true about Antarctica. Number 2, the Dropa Stones. In 1938, an expedition led by archaeologist Dr. Chipu Te in China made an intriguing discovery in a nearby cave. Buried under layers of dust, the team found hundreds of stone discs scattered throughout the cave. The discs were about 9 inches in diameter and had a circle cut into the center, and it featured an obvious spiral groove around it. Initially, there seemed to be nothing particularly special about the disc, but upon further examination, it became clear that they're eerily similar to phenograph records. It is believed that these stones are more than 10,000 years old. The spiral grooves on the disc turned out to be made of tiny hieroglyphs, and when these were studied and translated, it was revealed that the disc told the story of spaceships that had crashed into the mountains, piloted by people who referred to themselves as the Dropa. This interpretation was made by a Chinese researcher who announced its findings to the world. However, his announcement was met with ridicule from the scientific community, and this caused him to go into self-imposed exile in Japan. The Soviet magazine Sputnik later reported on an experiment in which the discs were placed on a special turntable and were observed to vibrate or hum in an unusual rhythm, as if an electrical charge was passing through them. Despite this, further research was not made public, and it is unclear if the Dropa stones still exist or if they're even real in the first place. Ernst Wegerer, an Austrian engineer, claims to have seen and photographed 2 of the stones, but they and the manager who allowed them to view them have since disappeared, adding to the mystery surrounding the artifact. Number 1. The Roman dodecahedron. The Roman dodecahedron is a mysteriously crafted metal object that has puzzled archaeologists for centuries. These 12-sided objects have been found at dozens of sites across northern Europe, dating back to the 1st and 5th century CE. But their purpose still remains unknown. More than 100 of these dodecahedrons have been discovered, ranging in size from about the size of a golf ball to slightly larger than a baseball. Each one is hollow and has 12 equally sized faces, each with a hole of varying diameter. Despite the obvious craftsmanship that went into these objects, there is no written documentation of them in historical sources. As a result, there has been many theories about the purpose of them. Some believe that they are used as a military banner ornament or some type of weapon, such as the head of a mace or a metal bullet for a handheld sling. However, these theories have been largely dismissed as the objects are too lightweight to be effective weapons. Others think that they may have been used for education or as a measuring tool for fabrics. One researcher even proposed that they may be used as a rangefinder by the Roman military. Number 10. The Great Scottish Witch Hunt. The Great Scottish Witch Hunt of 1597 was a dark and terrifying period in Scottish history. A nationwide series of witch trials took place from March to October in that year, during which at least 400 people were put on trial for witchcraft and other various forms of diabolicism. The exact number of those executed is unknown, but believed to be around 200, and this was only from the second of the 5 nationwide witch hunts in Scottish history. One of the most high-profile cases of the witch hunt was that of Margaret Aitken, also known as the Great Witch of Belweary. She was likely arrested in Fife in April 1597 and pleaded guilty under torture. She then offered to help the commission identify other witches in exchange for her own life. Aitken and the commission visited several parts of Scotland, and many people were arrested and put on trial and then executed based on her accusations alone. However, Aitken's credibility as an expert witness was later discredited when she declared innocent the same people she previously identified as witches. The English diplomat Robert Bowes reported that the King James VI was pestered and troubled by the large number of witches reported here, with some estimates being told to him that there was thousands. The accused came from all social classes, and the king himself was deeply involved in the trials as a result. Number 9. The Wurzburg Trials. The Wurzburg witch trials, which occurred between 1626 and 1631, were among the largest mass trials and executions of their kind in Europe during peacetime. 157 men, women, and children in the city of Wurzburg, Germany were burned alive at stake, with 219 executed in total in the city and 900 burnt altogether in the surrounding area. These individuals were accused of practicing sorcery and witchcraft, making a pact with the devil, and were part of the widespread witch hysteria that took place in South Germany during this time period. The persecutions were orchestrated by Julius Edgar von Mestelbrunn, Prince Bishop of Wurzburg, and his nephew Philip Adolf von Ehrenberg in the years following the Catholic reconquest of Germany in the 1620s. As a result, people from all walks of life were arrested and charged, regardless of age, profession, or sex, for a variety of reasons, which included murder, Satanism, or even humming a song with the devil. In his 8-year reign, von Mestelbrunn was responsible for burning 900 people, including his own nephew, 19 Catholic priests, and children aged 7 who were said to have intercourse with the devil. Frederick Spee, a Jesuit whose experience as a confessor of witches in the Great Persecution at Wurzburg led him to believe that all the confessions were based solely on torture, and not a single witch whom he had led to the stake was guilty at all. The trials were finally put to an end in 1631 when the city was taken by King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Number 8. The Basque Witch Trials. The Basque Witch Trials of Lograno near Navarre in northern Spain were one of the most ambitious attempts at rooting out witchcraft ever undertaken by the Spanish Inquisition, and perhaps the biggest single event of its kind in history. It began in January 1609 against the background of similar persecutions conducted in the Labourd province of Basque Country by Pierre Lecontre. The accused were mainly women, but also included children and other men, including priests guilty of healing with nomenas, which were these amulets with names of saints. The first phase of the trials ended in 1610 with a ritual of public penance for condemned heretics against 31 of the accused, 11 or 12 of whom were burned to death, and 5 who already died under torture. The proceedings were then suspended until the inquisitors had a chance to gather further evidence on what they believed to be a widespread witch cult in the Basque region. The junior inquisitor of the three-man tribunal, Alonso Solares Frias, traveled across the countryside during 1611 near the French border, where he claimed to know a cave and a water stream known as Hell Stream. Here, he said, was a supposed meeting place of the witches. He was armed with the Edict of Grace, promising pardon to all those who voluntarily reported themselves and denounced their accomplices, and denunciations flowed in. Frias finally returned to Lograno with confessions from 1,802 people, 1,300 of whom were children between the ages of 7 and 14, in turn implicating a further 5,000 or so named individuals. However, the vast majority of the witnesses retracted their statements before Salazar, attributing their confessions to torture, and only 6 of the 1,802 men maintained their confessions and claimed to have been attended Sabbats. Frias, the youngest judge in the Inquisition panel of the 3, was himself skeptical about the whole thing, saying that he found no solid proof of witchcraft on his travels in spite of the manifold confessions, and he questioned the whole basis of the trials. Number 7. The Valcamonica Witch Trials. The Valcamonica Witch Trials were 2 large trials which took place in Valcamonica in Italy in 1505 to 1510 and 1518 to 1521. They were among the biggest Italian witch trials and caused the deaths of about 60 people in each trial, 110 in total. The region had not undergone full conversion to Christianity until the 5th century, and thus even by the 8th century, the area was still suspect of paganism. In 1499, it was accused of having participated in a black mass, and it was reported to be common with such depravity in the area. This led to the laws of 1498, where stern laws were issued against all devilish heresy. The first trial, which went from 1505 to 1510, started with 7 women and 1 man being burnt in Simo and Valcamonica, and in 1510, witches were burned who were accused of having caused a drought by magic. 60 women and men confessed having injured people and animals and land with their spells. They caused fires. The second trial, which went from 1518 to 1521, occurred after the Peace of Noyon with France, and here in July 1518, more than 60 women and men were burned at the stake. The trials had a lasting impact on the region, with Christianity still weak in the area, even decades after the trials. The church had to instigate another visit to make the inhabitants more Catholic. Old pagan cults and habits were still alive there, but this time, however, the visit of the church did not lead to executions. Number 6. The trial of the Bideford Three. The story of the execution of Temperance Lloyd, Mary Trembles, and Susanna Edwards in the late 17th century in England serves as a tragic reminder of the country's superstitious past and the dangers of mass hysteria. By the late 17th century, the witch hunting craze had died down in England, and most of the witch trials after the Restoration in 1660 ended in acquittal. However, the trial of the Bideford witches were exceptional in that it ended with their execution. It was also remarkable in that the condemned women came from relatively sophisticated provincial towns, whereas most witch hunts occurred in isolated rural villages. The story of the trial is preserved in the Book of Bideford, written in 1792 by a local historian named John Watkins. Watkins believed that the women were the victims of hatred and ignorance, writing, quote, "There was always some poor devil, either on account of an unlucky visage, sour temper, or wretched poverty, set up as the object of terror and universal hatred. The women were accused of using witchcraft to cause the illnesses of a local woman, Grace Thomas, and the list of accusations grew as others came forward." The trial that took place on the 19th of August was not conducted by the usual means, as witchcraft was considered a crime apart and suspicion alone was adequate grounds for accusation. Being absent from the scene of the crime was not a sufficient alibi, and it was permitted for children to act as witnesses. The city was seized with curiosity about the witches, and the streets rang with tales of their supernatural powers. Public hysteria was at fever pitch, and Roger North, brother of Lord North, one of the judges due to preside over the trial, feared that the country's people would have committed some disorder if they were acquitted. As a result, the three women were found guilty and hanged in August 1682. In the hump of our list, we have the Salem witch trials. In January of 1692, the daughter and niece of Reverend Samuel Parris of Salem Village became ill. The girls were experiencing strange symptoms such as uncontrollable fits and hallucinations, and the local physician, William Griggs, was called in to diagnose their condition. To the shock and horror of the community, Griggs declared the girls were suffering from bewitchment. This diagnosis set into motion the events that would ultimately lead to the hanging deaths of 19 men and women, with one man being pressed to death and several others dying in prison. Soon, prisons were filled with more than 150 men and women from towns surrounding Salem. Their names have been cried out by tormented young girls as the cause of their pain. All of them would await trial for a crime punishable by death in the 17th century New England, the practice of witchcraft. In June of 1692, the Special Court of Oyer to hear and Terminer to decide sat in Salem to hear the cases of witchcraft. The first to be tried was Bridget Bishop of Salem, who was found guilty and was hanged on June 10th. This was followed by 13 other women and 5 other men who were also executed in the next 3 days. Eventually, the court was disbanded by Governor William Phips, and the court did not allow for any sort of spectral evidence no longer. Realizing their issues, they pardoned all those awaiting execution for witchcraft, and this marked the end of the infamous trials. Number 4, the Northern Moravia witch trials. Northern Moravia, a historical place in Czech Republic, was not a good place for perceived witches in the latter half of the 17th century. During the time, hundreds of women were burned at the stake as witches, and a single witch trial could lead up to 100 executions. One particular tragedy started during a mass when an altar boy saw that an old lady had pocketed her communion bread instead of eating it. When a priest confronted the woman about this, she explained that she was going to give the bread to her cow to increase its milk production. The priest took this as a sign of witchcraft and alerted a judge who specialized in such cases. Unfortunately, the justice system of the time actually derived revenue from trials. As the judges and courts sentenced more and more people for public burnings, they sustained their income by finding more and more witches to prosecute and execute. Their methods for finding new victims involved gathering accusations of witchcraft from concerned citizens, and of course, the tried and tested method of prisoner torture. This led to the cycle of fear where the community was constantly on the lookout for witches, accusing anyone who they found suspicious. The witch hunt in Northern Moravia reached a boiling point when the body count grew so high that the area's ruling class started to get concerned. Surely, it was just a matter of time before they or someone they cared about would fall victim to the witch hunt. With all their power, they started putting political pressure on the government to stop the trials. And this ultimately happened, and the people of Northern Moravia were left to wonder how on earth they condoned a brutal mass murder for so long. Number 3, the Dorochow trials. The Dorochow witch trials is a fascinating and historical event that has been shrouded in mystery and controversy for centuries. The trial, which allegedly took place in the 18th century in the village of Dorochow in Poland, is said to have been the last mass trial of witchcraft in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. According to older historians, in 1775, the inhabitants of Dorochow asked for the authorities in the nearby city of Grabau to halt the investigation of sorcery, which had been initiated in the village. The trial was conducted by the court of Grabau, which judged 14 people guilty of witchcraft and sentenced them to death. This trial allegedly led to the Polish government to ban torture and witch trials in 1776. However, modern Polish historians have cast doubt on the veracity of this account. Janusz Tasbier, for instance, has pointed out that the most detailed account of this event was given by early 19th century writer Konstantin Marzanowski, who had been found by later historians to have authored several historical hoaxes. Tasbier notes that the existing primary sources can prove that only 6, not 14 women were sentenced to death, and it is not clear whether they are actually executed. Further, the documents examined by Tasbier indicate that the trials took place not in 1775, but later in 1783 or even shortly before that. Number 2, the Trier witch trials. The witch trials of Trier is a dark chapter in history where thousands of people were accused, tortured, and executed for witchcraft in present-day Germany in the late 16th century. The trial, which took place in 1581 and 1593 in the independent Catholic diocese of Trier, is considered to be one of the largest and most brutal witch trials in history. The trials were initiated by Johann von Schauenberg, the Archbishop of Trier, who was deeply influenced by the Jesuits. He sought to demonstrate his convictions by purging the society of 3 groups he deemed as nonconformists: Protestants, Jews, and witches. He ordered the persecution of these groups, and the trials soon escalated, leading to the death of about 368 people in Trier alone, and possibly thousands more throughout the entire diocese. The exact number of executions have never been established, with estimates ranging from a few hundred to over 1,000. The trials were characterized by the use of torture, with many innocent people accused and put to death. The accused were often put through brutal interrogations, including the use of thumb screws, waterboarding, and other forms of brutal punishment. The trials were also marked by the greed and corruption, as notaries, copyists, and innkeepers grew rich from the trials, while the executioner rode a blooded horse and dressed in gold and silver. The trials had a devastating impact on the region, leaving many villages with only one female inhabitant and causing widespread devastation and suffering. Many of the victims were innocent people, including men, women, and children of the nobility, and people with positions in the government and administration. The persecutions lasted for several years, with many people doubting that all of those who were accused were actually guilty. And obviously, as we know today, probably none of them were guilty. Number 1, the Island McGee witches. In September 1710, an older widow of local priests was staying in No Head House in the rural region of Island McGee, Ireland. Her stay was plagued by mysterious events, such as invisible hands hurling stones at windows. Around this time, household objects disappeared and reappeared, and bedclothes were rearranged in the shape of a corpse. The widow even saw a frightening demonic creature, warning her that she would die soon. The apparition was not joking. On February 21st, 1711, the widow died after experiencing a series of stabbing pains in her back. The locals immediately suspected that witches had something to do with the widow's terrible fate. After a young girl called Mary Dunbar found a strange apron containing the bonnet of the dead widow, supernatural events started to happen around her too. She appeared to be possessed, vomiting small household objects like pins and buttons, and even levitating above her bed. After a month of torment, Mary managed to name 8 women from the area as witches responsible for the events. This was based on the way their spirit images had been visiting her. The local clergy, along with Edward Clements, the mayor of the nearby Carrickfergus, who is the ancestor of Samuel Clements, also known as Mark Twain, started investigating the case. The 8 women were taken to court despite their pleas of innocence. There were very little actual proof against them, apart from Mary's accusations and eyewitness reports of her convulsions. Even so, the witches were sentenced to a year's imprisonment in a filthy prison, all because the judge probably wasn't happy about killing witches, and especially ones who could potentially visit him in his sleep. Starting our list right, at number 10 we have Mysterious Origins. I think it's best to introduce this doll by sharing its disturbing origins. According to legend, in the early 1900s, a wealthy American family known as the Ottos committed an unspeakable offense against their young maid from the Bahamas. In an act of retaliation, the maid gifted the young Otto boy Eugene a dog named Robert who had been cursed by a voodoo priestess. In the following years, Eugene would be uncomfortably close to the doll. He would speak to it as if it was a real person and would become violently angry with anyone who just looked at it without his permission. Looking without permission meant that they were being disrespectful to Robert. And on top of that, most of the Otto family friends stopped visiting, claiming to have seen the doll move by itself or having heard it giggle and laugh in the dead of night. The family had enough and decided to send the doll to a museum where many people believe that visiting the doll is a reason for their personal tragedies. And it's to be noted that you should not view it without its permission or take any photos, or else misfortune will find you. At our number 9 spot, we have It's the Same Company that invented the teddy bear. As mentioned before, he was a handmade doll, but many don't know that Robert was built in the same company that created the first ever teddy bear, showing that evil and good can exist in the same place. But this kind of makes me think of teddy bears differently, especially when the company that made the teddy bear was also one who made one of the most cursed objects in the world. The company's name is Steve Company, which was located in Germany. They created the teddy bear in honor of Theodore Roosevelt. But for Robert, they didn't intend to release him at all, and said he was a part of a window display of clown and gestures. Well, I guess the joke's on us. Stealing our number 8 spot, we have Robert is Possessed. So it's widely believed that the doll is in fact possessed. They place the blame on the person who originally gave the doll to Eugene Otto, which was the servant who worked for the family. It's reported that she was abused and mistreated by the family, which led her to cursing the doll using voodoo and black magic. The doll would consume Eugene and would often be caught talking and painting with the doll until his death in 1974. The doll seemed to be possessed before his death, but after, it only got worse. And that's where we'll get onto our next point. Onto our next point, at number 7, we have Myrtle Reuter. When Eugene Otto died in 1974, his doll and the house were the only things that he left behind. So eventually the artist's house was purchased by Myrtle Reuter, who was also granted the task to take care of Robert the doll. In addition to sourceless footsteps and giggling, Reuter and her visitors reported seeing Robert's facial expressions change whenever his owner Gene was mentioned. They also swore he had the ability to move between different rooms of the house without any help. And her 10-year-old daughter would find Robert in the attic where she claimed he was alive and trying to hurt her. After 20 years, she had enough and finally decided to donate Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where he still resides today. On to our next point, at number 6, we have Fort East Martello Museum. Now the doll haunts a small museum in Key West, Florida. It now haunts the entire building, and it's said that school children walking by outside report seeing Robert move from window to window. Staff at the museum claim that Robert has been found in different positions within his case. That footsteps have been heard around the museum at night with no apparent explanation for the noise, and that Robert's expression has been known to change from neutral to nasty in a blink of an eye. Visitors in the museum take precaution before meeting Robert. It's said that you need to speak to him in a polite way. You need to ask his permission to photograph him and to treat him with the most utmost respect. The walls around him are littered with apologies from guests for their behavior. That's literally how much people fear his ability to curse others. This is because many visitors who don't respect Robert claim they face dreadful misfortune, such as getting into accidents, losing relationship, illnesses and disease. So these apologies are actually for good reason. Right in the hump of our list, we have Don't Get Robert Mad. Now that we mentioned that he's currently in the Fort East Martello Museum, I think it's best to know that his terror didn't stop there. It only continued at a grander scale. One Reddit user named Dun Myth was with his wife and son when they decided to take a trip to Key West. They had heard about Robert in the past, so just because they were passing through, it just made sense to take a visit. The man's wife was superstitious and was very nervous when approaching Robert. On the other hand, the man was not nice about it and decided to tease her about it, which in hindsight, he knew that he pissed Robert off. Once they finished, and as they were leaving, they noticed that their car wouldn't start. It's also good to mention that this car was a luxury car, bought new, and was less than a year old. But when the mechanic came, the battery connectors just crumbled because they were that corroded. The mechanic claimed he had never seen anything that bad. This led the husband to walk back to the museum to apologize to Robert. I know, creepy stuff. All the way at our number 4 spot, we have Robert moving his foot. A lot of people decide to record Robert as they visit the museum. Many don't really record anything supernatural, and besides, they are usually stressed because of the conditions needed to visit Robert. As mentioned already, you need to ask permission to take pictures or videos or even talk to the doll. If not, people claim bad luck and negativity in their lives. So here's a video of someone showing Robert the doll. Although it's unconfirmed if they ask for permission, it's super eerie the way Robert just moves. Right at our number 3 spot, we have Robert inflicts pain. Just one more museum encounter for our list, I promise. Reddit user Taiji Lu talked about his tragic encounter with Robert the doll. He was super excited to see the doll. A kid in the candy shop is how he described it. He reported feeling heavy the moment he was in the same room as Robert, and he even claimed to see apparitions in the corner of his eyes. The user took a photo of Robert, and once he started to tell the story to one of his friends, the atmosphere changed and he felt sick to the stomach. As they rode back home on their bikes, the kid would fall off and dislocate his knee, and to this day, he would still blame it on Robert the doll. We're almost done, and at our number 2 spot, we have Ozzy Osbourne. I know it's a bit random, but I wasn't surprised that Ozzy Osbourne had a connection to this cursed doll. Just in case you've been living under a rock, Ozzy Osbourne took over the 70s with his heavy metal vocals and personality. In this series, Ozzy and Jack's World Detour, they decided to pay a visit to the doll. During the visit, Ozzy and his son did apologize and ask for permission, but the doll just didn't seem fazed.
Do you believe in that voodoo?
I think that's some weird
superstition.
After this occasion, Ozzy had a terrible 2019. He took many serious falls, causing many major bruises and cuts. He underwent neck surgery, he got an infection in his hand, and was hospitalized for a flu. He blamed all of this on the cursed doll.
Sorry, Robert.
Sorry, pardon.
So if Ozzy Osbourne speaks, we listen. At our number 1 spot of our list, we have an inspiration from Chucky. One of the most influential horror films of all time, is 1980's Child's Play. This starred the infamous killer doll Chucky. Even though he isn't a real person, he is based on a real figure. And you guessed it, it's Robert the doll. These stories have very many similarities. Like Robert, Chucky was a gift to a little boy who at first saw Chucky as his best friend and primary companion. Chucky's tale also parallels Robert's because they are both living dolls who cause chaos wherever they go. Both these dolls are just entities of mischievous deeds. Number 10, Rodney Alcala. Rodney Alcala, also known as the dating game killer, was a very twisted serial killer in the 1970s. He was even described as a killing machine by investigating detectives, as he would strangle his victims, revive them, and then strangle them once again, repeating this process until they died or he just got bored. Alcala's reign of terror began even before he appeared on a popular dating show called The Dating Game as a contestant, in which he won the episode and a date with Bachelorette Cheryl Bradshaw. However, Bradshaw refused to go out with him because she found him, quote, creepy. Despite this, Alcala went on to kill 3 more women after his appearance on the show. Alcala's killing spree came to an end when he was eventually sentenced to death for the murders of 5 women committed in California between 1977 and 1979. However, it is believed that the real victim count could be as high as 130. This assumption was made after detectives found over 1,000 photos belonging to Alcala in his Seattle storage locker. Many of the subjects in the photos appearing nude, and in March 2010, some of the photos were released to the public in hopes of identifying the people in them. Thanks to these photos, Alcala was charged in 2016 with the 1977 slaying of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thornton. Number 9, Dennis Rader. Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill, was a man who lived a double life. To the Wichita community, he was a respected church president and a Boy Scouts leader. But behind closed doors, he was a sadistic serial killer who took the lives of 10 innocent victims over the period of 17 years, ranging from 1974 to 1991. He had a specific MO, where he would stalk his victims, break into their homes, bind them, torture them, and eventually asphyxiate them. For years, Radar went free, and his ability to evade police led to an increased arrogance. He even sent the police and media letters taunting them with graphic details of his killings, and even sent them a floppy disk in 2005 which he thought could not be traced back to him, but this ultimately led to his downfall. After his capture in 2005, graphic details of his horrific actions were revealed through the letters and drawings he sent to the police throughout the years, and also creepy images of Radar dressed in his victims' clothing were made public. These were what some of them looked like. It was said that Radar enjoyed dressing up as his victims in peril. He would take photos of himself bound, hanging, and even buried. He would also take photos of his victims and reenact specific scenes using items he took from his victims. Psychologists believe that the offenders will sometimes don their victims' clothing or personal items in an attempt to recreate the scene and achieve sexual gratification. And this is true because the photos that he took then became trophies in and of itself. Number 8, Israel Keys. Samantha Koenig, an 18-year-old barista in Anchorage, Alaska, had her life tragically taken by serial killer Israel Keys. Keys was a man who had been committing murders across the country since at least 1998, using different methods to kill his victims and burying murder kits for years before using them. He was a master of evasion, and it wasn't until the murder of Koenig that authorities were able to track him down, and let me warn you, this one is pretty gruesome. On February 1st, 2012, Keys walked up to the drive-thru window of the coffee shop where Koenig worked. This is where he pointed a revolver at her and ordered her to turn off the lights. He then bound her hands, stuffed a handful of napkins in her mouth, and forced her into the pickup truck. He told her that he only wanted to hold her ransom, but that was a lie. He took her debit card and her cell phone and then drove to his house where he kept her in a tool shed. Then in the middle of the night, he strangled Koenig to death and then went back inside to check on his daughter and his girlfriend, making sure they were asleep. He then packed his bags and one for his daughter, and at 5 a.m. he called a cab to the airport to fly to New Orleans for a 2-week Caribbean cruise that he planned with his family. The next day, Koenig was reported missing, but it was too late. Keys sent a ransom photo to Koenig's parents, but it was a fake, taken after he had killed her and where he had sewn her eyelids open with a fishing line. He was arrested and confessed to at least 10 murders before he killed himself in prison. In his jail cell, he had 11 drawings of skulls, a drawing of the Baphomet, and a description of the carousel, all made by his own blood. Number 7, Dean Corll. Dean Corll, also known as the Candyman, was a twisted serial killer and torturer who terrorized the city of Houston, Texas between the years 1970 and 1973. Corll would use candy to lure his vulnerable victims, mostly young boys and young men, into a false sense of security before abducting, assaulting, and killing them. He was not acting alone, however, as he had the help of 2 teenage accomplices, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Hanley Jr. Together, they would bury the victims in various parts of Texas, leaving families to wonder about their missing loved ones. Corll's reign of terror finally came to an end on August 7, 1973, when Hanley, one of his accomplices, shot him in an act of self-defense. Corll had demanded that Hanley assault one of the 2 victims he had abducted, but instead, Hanley used a .22 caliber pistol to murder Corll. Brooks and Hanley were both subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment for their roles in Corll's murder spree. It was believed that Corll had murdered at least 28 teenage boys and young men. However, in 2012, a photograph was uncovered that is believed to show a 29th victim. The photograph taken by Corll himself showed a scared looking boy with handcuffs on his arms staring up at the camera. Filmmaker Josh Vargas discovered the photograph while researching Corll's case. He said, quote, "I took a look at it and right off the bat have studied the case and the crime scene photos and everything. I see Dean's toolbox and I see his implements in the toolbox and I see this kid right here with handcuffs on his arms." Number 6, Harvey Glattman. Harvey Glattman, also known as the Glamour Girl Slayer and the Lonely Hearts Killer, was a truly twisted and terrifying serial murderer in the late 1950s. He would post lonely heart ads in newspapers and prowl modeling agencies in Los Angeles, where he would pose as a photographer to lure his victims. Once he had them in his grasp, he would take them back to his apartment, tie them up, and proceed to assault them before strangling them and hiding their bodies in the desert. He would take photos of his victims up until the moment before they lost their lives, each one appearing terrified and very desperate. Glattman's reign of terror came to an end in 1958 after an attempted abduction of Lorraine Vigil, who was seen try to escape from Glattman's grasp. When questioned about Vigil, Glattman willingly confessed to his past kidnappings and murders, and he even revealed his toolbox, which contained the chilling photographs of his victims. During his sentencing, Glattman accepted his death penalty and requested that no executive effort be made to save his life. He was executed in a gas chamber at St. Quentin State Prison on September 18, 1959. In the hump of our list, Rodney Ben Rhodes. Serial killer Robert Ben Rhodes, also known as the truck stop killer, was a man who had a secret side to his life that was far from normal. Rhodes used his 18-wheeler semi-truck as a mobile torture and death chamber. He converted the sleeper cab of his truck into a small makeshift sex chamber where he would kidnap, torture, and assault his victims for weeks on end before ultimately killing them in the most brutal manner imaginable. Basically, a vicious cycle of kidnap, torture, and kill. It is believed that Rhodes picked up and killed more than 50 people beginning in 1975, although he was only convicted of 3 murders. Rhodes was finally caught on April 1st, 1990 when Arizona State Trooper Mike Miller found Kathleen Vine nude, handcuffed, and screaming in the cab of his truck. But Rhodes didn't get life in prison for that crime. Instead, he went away for the death of 14-year-old runaway Regina K. Walters. The photo of Walters taken by Rhodes was used as evidence in the court, as it showed her clearly frightened and backing away from him. It's also revealed that Rhodes had her captive for a long time based on her hair growth and the bruises on her tiny frame. Then finally in 1994, Rhodes was finally sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Number 4, Robert Berdella. Robert Berdella, also known as the Kansas City Butcher and the Collector, was a sadistic serial killer who terrorized the city of Kansas City, Missouri between the years 1984 and 1987. He was known for his disturbing method of documenting his crimes through photographs, which were later discovered by police. Berdella's MO was to lure his victims in with offers of money or lodging. Once they were under his control, he would subject them to unspeakable acts of physical torture for days and sometimes for weeks on end. Here, he would inject caulk in their ears to deafen them, shoot drain cleaner in their throats to diminish their ability to speak, administer electroshocks to their body, and blindfold them with bags over their heads. The photographs he took of his victims, some who were already dead, were later found by police alongside human remains, including 2 skulls and notebooks detailing his methods of torture. Berdella's reign of terror came to an end when one of his victims, a 22-year-old male prostitute named Christopher Bryson, managed to escape on the 4th day of his captivity. While Berdella was away, Bryson broke free from his restraints and jumped from the 2nd floor window wearing only a dog collar around his neck. He ran to the police station and reported the atrocities he had been subjected to, leading to Berdella's eventual arrest. Number 3, the mysterious serial killer. The case of Tara Calico's disappearance in 1988 is one that has left many questions unanswered and continues to be a source of intrigue and speculation for true crime enthusiasts. On September 20th, 1988, 19-year-old Tara Calico failed to return from her regular bike ride in Valencia County, New Mexico, near her home in Belen. What was initially thought to be a simple kidnapping case soon evolved into a potential serial killer case. 9 months after Tara's disappearance, a woman discovered a Polaroid in good condition 1,600 miles away in Florida. The photograph showed 2 people bound with their arms behind their backs and tape over their mouths. The young woman in the photograph closely resembled Tara, and the boy was believed to be Michael Henley of Milan, New Mexico, who went missing 6 months before Tara when he was 9. The parents of both victims were convinced that it was their children in the photograph. It was discovered that the boy in the photograph was not Michael, as his remains were found, and his death had been a tragic accident. This revelation only added to the mystery and speculation surrounding Tara's disappearance and the origin of the photograph. One theory is that the photograph may have been from another serial killer's collection. This theory is supported by the fact that Sarah's photograph was found in Florida, far from where Tara and Michael disappeared. Some people believe that the photograph may have been a trophy for the killer, a way to relieve the thrill of their crime, but to this day, no one really knows what happened to Tara, and the photo is the only form of evidence we're ever going to have. Number 2, Jeffrey Dahmer. Imagine stumbling upon a collection of photographs so disturbing and gruesome that they sent chills down your spine. This was the reality for Milwaukee police officers in 1991 when they arrested notorious serial killer and cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer. On July 22, a man named Tracy Edwards was found wandering the streets with handcuffs dangling from his wrist, claiming that a weird dude in a nearby apartment had put him on him. When the police arrived at the address, which turned out to be Dahmer's residence, they found a collection of Polaroids depicting dismembered human bodies. As officers began to search the apartment, the true horrors of Dahmer's crimes came to light. In the refrigerator, an officer found a severed head of a man as well. Dahmer fought with the officers in an attempt to avoid arrest, but it was too late. The officers described 3 more severed heads, 7 skulls, blood drippings collected in a tray, 2 human hearts, and an entire torso. The chief medical examiner described the scene as, quote, more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. Dahmer's personal collection of Polaroids were a chilling reminder of the heinous crimes he had committed. He had murdered 17 boys and men, many of whom he dismembered and kept bodies as trophies. Dahmer's twisted fantasies were brought to light for the world to see, but the memory of his victims and the trauma they suffered will never be forgotten. Number 1, Jerry Brudos. This was the last photo of 19-year-old Karen Sprinker, shortly before she was murdered by the lust killer in 1969. Jerry Brudos, also known as the Lust Killer, was a necrophile and a serial killer who had a twisted attraction to his victims. He killed them in cold blood, often while wearing women's clothes, and then kept many of his victims' shoes as trophies. Brudos had a fetish for women's shoes since the age of 5, and he received psychotherapy as a teenager after he was caught stealing women's underwear. Between 1968 and 1969, he murdered 4 more women and attempted to attack 2 others in Oregon. Sometime in May of 1968, Brudos dressed as a woman abducted 18-year-old Karen Sprinker from a shopping mall parking lot and later photographed her in his garage just hours before her murder. He made her pose in lingerie he had bought and then strangled her before dumping the body. This was not his first murder. He killed 3 more women before he was caught. Then finally in May 1969, a fisherman found the bodies of Sprinkler and Linda Sale, which is another person he had murdered, in the Oregon's Long Tom River. This discovery led to the arrest of Brudos on June 28, 1969, where he later pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life behind bars, and Brudos never showed any remorse for his crimes. Instead, he put the blame on his own mother, claiming that she had been abusive all his life.